Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is my Forbes colleague, money and politics reporter, Kyle Khan-Mullins. Kyle, thanks so much for coming back on.
Fantastic to be here, Brittany.
You recently wrote for Forbes, here's how much every living former president earned after leaving the White House. So I thought it'd be fun if we could start off with a little history lesson from you. How did presidents spend their time after leaving the White House?
Have done all sorts of stuff after leaving the White House. So you could go all the way back to George Washington. He went back to his plantation in Virginia, where he owned over 300 slaves, worked on expanding that plantation. You look at Thomas Jefferson. He founded the University of Virginia after leaving. He was actually apparently more proud of founding the University of Virginia than of being president of the United States. Other presidents, some one-termers, ended up finding second careers in politics. John Quincy Adams became a congressman, very prominent congressman afterwards. William Howard Taft actually became the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I think he's the only person in U.S. history to head two different branches of government at various points. People like Teddy Roosevelt have done some crazy stuff, like explore, thousands of miles of the Amazon rainforest. But in more recent years, post-presidencies have gotten quite lucrative, and that's what we're going to be talking about today.
And for someone who it was the most lucrative for is Donald Trump. And as we know, Donald Trump was a one-term president. He's now vying to make it 2 terms. And you and the Money and Politics team are reporting that he really takes making money post-White House to a whole new level, becoming the first person to make $1 billion off of politics. So how much is he worth?
Yeah, my colleague Dan Alexander had that piece just a week or so ago. That was a fantastic piece. He for $1 billion off of politics, we're estimating, and that puts his estimated net worth as of today, I just checked the tracker, at $3.9 billion. Enough, by the way, to put him back on the Forbes 400 list this year.
Yeah, he made it back on the Forbes 400 list, but you did write this because back in 2021, it wasn't, as financially optimistic for the former president. You say that he left his first term in dire financial straits. Bring us back to that time.
Yeah, his whole business empire was suffering under the combined weights of, one, a global pandemic that was leaving his office buildings empty and his golf courses struggling and his clubs struggling, and the weight of a owner, Donald Trump, who was very unpopular with the American public at the time, especially after the January 6th Capitol riots. And so you had, tenants fleeing his buildings. You had people, just generally, his empire was suffering, and he did drop off the Forbes 400 list for the first time in 25 years. Was off the Forbes 400 list in 2021, shortly after he left office.
And financially, as you said, he rebounded quite nicely, now has a net worth of $3.9 billion. What did he do after he left office to turn his finances around?
He did a couple of things. First thing he did, he restructured a bunch of his debt, and that lessened his burdens a lot, gave him a big influx of cash, made it easier for him to balance his whole real estate portfolio. Second thing, his clubs and golf courses have benefited from a booming economy and have benefited from specifically his supporters going to his clubs and golf courses. Doral, Mar-a-Lago, these big clubs in Florida have exploded in value over the past couple of years because of so much higher, much better business. And then the third thing he did, and by far the most important thing he did when it comes to his net worth, is he got in on the ground floor at Truth Social, his Twitter knockoff company, that despite losing hundreds of millions of dollars last year on just a few $1 million of revenue, Truth Social is worth billions of dollars, at least according to the stock market and the folks who are trading it on the stock market every day. Donald Trump owns a majority of that company, and so that has helped push his net worth, like I said, up to $3.9 billion today.
So now we're going to move backwards and continue on with President Barack Obama, a 2-term Democrat. How much did he make in office?
So Forbes previously estimated that Barack Obama made about $20 million while he was in Washington. So that includes his time as a senator and his time as president. The vast majority of that money came from writing a couple of books. His book sales were millions and millions of dollars, especially when he was a senator and soon after he became president. But his salary and Michelle's career also contributed to those values as well. So we estimate about $20 million came into office as a senator and when he left office after 2 terms as president.
So $20 million, but then that fortune really skyrocketed after he left the White House. How much is he worth now, and how did he make it?
Yeah, so we're estimating that Barack Obama is worth at least $70 million. It's a little bit hard to get an exact number on former politicians because we don't have this access to the same kind of financial disclosures that we normally have for people who are currently in office. That's up a lot. We estimated in 2012, for example, that he was worth about $6 million. So that's a pretty big boost from where he was. And a lot of that money came from a series of different media deals. He and Michelle sold their memoir rights for $65 million, reportedly, right after they left office. That's no small chunk of change. He also did sign a deal with Netflix. We don't know exactly how much that was worth, but it's been renewed multiple times, and he's actually won 2 Emmys. And he and Michelle have also benefited from a classic post-presidential tactic, paid speeches. People will pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars to come give speeches at their events, and that is a way to basically print money.
And the Obamas have quite the real estate portfolio. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, they've got 4 homes in Democratic bastions, deep blue areas. You've got a home in Chicago, a home in Washington, D.C., a home in Martha's Vineyard, and a home in Hawaii. All in all, it's worth about $35 million at least.
So now we are going back to the beginning of this century, George W. Bush's presidency. He, as we know, came from a political dynasty. Did he enter the White House rich?
He did enter the White House wealthy. He started his career in the oil industry. Most of his money actually came from a successful investment in the Texas Rangers. And while he was governor of Texas, he actually sold that stake in the Texas Rangers, made lots of money off of that. So that is where most of George W. Bush's money came. He was a multimillionaire when he entered office.
And so what happened to his fortune while he was in office?
As far as we can tell, based on those financial disclosures, it appears to have shrunk. Not by a lot, but by at least a small amount. You're not making as much when you're president as you are when you're investing in sports teams. So we don't know exactly, again, because these ranges on the disclosures keep things pretty vague. But we do know that he told a journalist shortly before he left office that he intended to refill the old coffers. So that gives us a sense that he was perhaps feeling a little more pinched than he was when he entered office.
And so did he refill those old coffers? Because he's been out of the spotlight a little more so than Obama, than Trump, than even former President Clinton. So how much is he worth today, and how did he make that money post-presidency?
Yeah, George W. Bush absolutely has stayed out of the spotlight, but he has refilled the coffers several times. So first thing he did, wrote a book, classic post-presidency, post-politician thing to do. That reportedly made him, the book deal alone made him about $7 million. That's a pretty good number. The book was called Decision Points. It was about his time in the White House. Additionally, he really laid into those paid speeches. Politico's reported that he gave hundreds of these paid speeches, again, making hundreds of thousands of dollars for each one. Upwards of $100,000. Upwards of $100,000 for each one. So he has made plenty of money from that. We estimate that he is worth about $40 million today.
So now let's take it back all the way to the 90s. Former President Bill Clinton, and according to his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, they left the White House actually in debt. How so?
Yeah, so Bill Clinton had a lot of legal problems when he was in office, and a lot of those were covered by the White House counsel, but a lot of them were not. So we see in Hillary's disclosures soon after they left office that they still report a lot of legal debt. There's some dispute over whether they were quite as broke as they say they were, but regardless, they made the money back really, really quickly.
Talk about that. How did they make their fortune back and then some?
Really the epitome of how you can really cash in on a post-presidency. They went all in on the speeches. They went all in on writing books. They went all in on consulting, especially Bill, because Hillary was in and out of office. She was a senator from New York. She ran for president twice. The second time, of course, became the nominee. And so they made an estimated between 2001, when Bill Clinton initially left office, and 2016, when Hillary Clinton became the Democratic nominee for president, and then ultimately, of course, lost to Donald Trump. They made an estimated $240 million from all of their various activities then.
Now, I do want to talk about Jimmy Carter, who celebrated a milestone birthday. He is now 100 years old, but he did live a more modest life post-presidency, which is different than the other presidents we talked about. So talk to us about Jimmy Carter's life after he left office.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter told the Washington Post a couple of years ago that it was never his ambition to get rich. And he is the only former president that we've talked about in this article that we didn't estimate his net worth. We didn't try to. Part of that is it's really, really difficult to estimate someone's net worth when you don't have any documentation about how much money they've made. But part of it is that we don't actually think he's worth all that much. He and his wife Rosalind donated their home to the U.S. government for use after they die as a museum. Rosalind actually died last year. Jimmy's been in hospice care for over a year now. So they donated their house to the U.S. government back in the 90s. And they've basically stayed away from these paid speeches that have made every president since Gerald Ford, other than Jimmy Carter, tons and tons of money. Carter really leaned into the book writing. He and Rosalind wrote 34 books after leaving office. That's an average of one a year, which is just really incredible. Some of them have done quite well. I think the best-selling novel, as far as we can tell, or his best-selling work, as far as we can tell, was a book about Palestine and arguing for peace, not apartheid. That was the subtitle of the book. So that's been Jimmy Carter's life since. As by all accounts, quite a modest life after leaving the office.
Well, Kyle, per usual, I appreciate your reporting. You're welcome back anytime.
Thanks so much, Brittany. Always great to be here.